And joining me on this India Today special broadcast from Paris is Nicholas Barr, Editor-in-Chief of Politico France. Also with me is Vidushi Marda. She's Director of Partnerships AI Collaborative. Let me quickly come to Nicholas Barr first, and I'm trying to understand from you, Nicholas. Welcome on India Today. What is the key takeaway for you, from this summit? How does one ensure that big tech does not use AI to influence opinion in developing countries? Something that Prime Minister Narendra Modi also pointed out.
Yes, certainly. What we are seeing is that there's a really it's striking to me. There's really a common language between the Prime Minister and what President Macron has said. You can see that the two leaders are really close on these issues, and if there's a common understanding from both sides, it's there's a different language coming from the vice president, the US vice president. It's so. In other words, Europe is and France in particular is much closer to what Prime Minister Modi is saying and said today than what the the US Prime Minister has said, and this is really striking. I mean, when the Prime Minister says that AI must be free of bias, that it must be fair, available to anyone, that all this language, you can put it in the mouth of the French president.
Yes. And that is something that both of them, have emphasized on even in the past. Vidushi Marda, India, as Nicholas was also telling us right now, has been pushing for fair access to artificial intelligence, especially for developing countries, for global south countries. But are AI superpowers and big tech receptive to this idea, or is this then a dialogue of the deaf?
I mean, it's definitely not a dialogue of the deaf. One of the main things that is coming out of the summit is the launch of a new global partnership on championing AI in the public interest. It is deliberately global, and it's called Current AI. And the focus here is to ensure that AI systems, data sets, models, accountability measures, and standards are within the realm of not just global superpowers, but everyone. Current AI will be focusing on ensuring that high quality data sets are made available in critical domains for the public interest, including health and science. We're going to ensure that the best open tools around safety and keeping us safe when we use AI systems is made accessible to all. It's also going to ensure that accountability is a global effort and greater than the sum of the many, brilliant parts that are building towards AI accountability. So if anything, this is a moment that is showing us that we're at the beginning of a long collaborative and global path towards ensuring that AI works for people and communities.
And are China and the United States on the same page? Is the world on the same page on this? In your appreciation, Vidushi Marda, your response first before I bring in Nicholas Barr?
Yeah, so through this entire process over the last year, we've been in close contact with governments, with industry, with partners from civil society and the technical community. And I think it's a matter of when, not if, in terms of how we all come together and work collaboratively towards this reality. We have a number of country partners who have signed on to the charter coming out of the AI Summit, and also have expressed interest in building together. And it's really a very encouraging sign to see the strength of the room, the energy of the room, and the spirit of collaboration, and that we must all win for any of us to win.
Nicholas Barr, one of the bigger issues or one of the biggest apprehensions in the world remains fear of job losses due to AI. Prime Minister Narendra Modi sought to address that in terms of reskilling and upskilling. How difficult would that be, especially for the developing countries?
Yeah, well, of course, it's a challenge, although we don't know exactly the magnitude of the challenge. Obviously, AI will also create jobs in many ways. It will boost efficiencies in some industries, but at the same time, we all know that some jobs are some categories of jobs are in danger. That's for sure. But at the moment, it's very hard to predict exactly the magnitude of this of the impact of AI, and it's been the case in any, I mean, in the history of innovation. You've always seen that in the past, concern and at the same time optimism on innovation. So it's clearly a challenge for the education systems. We need to, I mean, in any countries, you will need to, we will need to adapt the education system, and to also make sure that the workers all along their lives are trained to new technologies. This is a difficult challenge, but it's also fascinating and stimulating.
Indeed. And Vidushi Marda, the bigger issue of job losses, apprehension of job losses due to artificial intelligence, the issue of upskilling and reskilling, fair and equitable access to artificial intelligence. How is the world moving forward on that, and especially for Global South?
I think the needs of different countries vary differently when it comes to this particular AI moment and beyond. Talent and ensuring that talent is on the same page as AI development, and ensuring that everyone is well placed to benefit from this current moment is a priority for all countries, and maybe a bigger priority for some as opposed to others. And I think the main achievement of this moment is to ground our understanding of AI and its future in ground realities and on what local communities need. So I think collaboratively thinking about what specific countries need and working from there onwards, instead of thinking about what technology can offer and trying to fit countries into that conversation, is absolutely necessary. And we look well placed to do it at the moment.
Oh, that's nice to hear. Nicholas Barr, what were the big ideas on the table that were discussed and that can be taken forward now?
There have been lots of discussions. Parts of the discussions are around data protection, cyber attacks, and this is of course a big concern. And we know that on data protection, different countries don't share the same views. Of course, China is on one side of the world, but also in the US, you don't have probably the same views as in Europe or in India. There are also many talks about how to regulate AI. What's the good level of regulation compared to the needs of innovation and things like that. And on this also, you heard what the the US Vice President said. I mean, essentially, he was saying, well, don't regulate. We need to boost innovation, and then we'll see what happens. Of course, that's not exactly the way Europeans and probably Indians see that. We need to have a legal framework. We need to have a democratized access to AI resources. We need to guarantee that everyone can access to this technology in a fairly manner, as the Prime Minister said. And so there's a whole discussion on these issues that is sometimes difficult, to be honest.
True. And Vidushi Marda, there were concerns raised about, as Nicholas Barr was pointing out, cybersecurity, disinformation. The Prime Minister spoke of deepfakes. How does one guard against that in an open society like India, and the threat especially posed by deepfakes?
We need shared understanding of the technical, but also the social realities of how these systems are built, how they are spread, how they gain credibility, and how they can be stopped. I think, so far it's been within the domain of, say, only the technologists to understand what to do about deepfakes. And, we saw different attempts to maybe block the possibility. But as we've learned, it's not really possible to stop the development of technology in the open domain, but but we can be more responsible on platforms. We can be more careful about how we think about the health of our news ecosystem and build in, an interdisciplinary fashion. And that's why we need a room that is filled with the best minds, not just from industry and not just from government, but also civil society and from the technical community.
And what is the governance architecture that we are talking about, that we are looking at, that we are trying to arrive at, Nicholas Barr? Rules that would apply not just in one part of the world, but would be applicable across the world, since cyberspace makes this entire world into one village. Nicholas Barr, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
The governance architecture.
Well, it's there's a legal framework that was put in place in Europe. So in that sense, probably this continent is a bit in advance compared to others. So we have some regulations in place, and you've seen how the big tech, the US big tech, have been quite unhappy with that. We're under pressure from the US to change this legislation. It's not going to happen, but it's so we have this framework here, but it's another issue to extend that to other parts of the world.
And Vidushi Marda, is it easy to take that across the world? Because everywhere there are different yardsticks. So what is that common governance system or architecture, an overarching architecture that can be put in place or is being put in place?
We have a combination of existing standards that are already in place and a number of things that we need to put in place in order to get to where we want. So in terms of what is already existing, we have international human rights standards that are agreed upon. We have technical standards that many technical standardization organizations have worked on for a long time to ensure that we're all operating at the same level and with the same requirements. Domestic regulations and legislations, much like the EU and in India, they need to be put in place as a starting point, and then thinking about harmonizing them along with global standards and ensuring that we're at the best common denominator is absolutely crucial. I think many times we talk about fragmentation of regulation as something that stops us from making progress and getting to global standards. But in my view, it's actually quite possible to build from the local and build on the strengths from each of local jurisdictions to work with international standards that are already existing and then identify the ones that need to be put in place.
Because the Prime Minister spoke of AI and its transformative role, for example, in healthcare or education or agriculture, and also towards, achieving the SDG goals. Where is India, Vidushi Marda, in your view, compared to the world when it comes to harnessing the power of artificial intelligence?
India's approach to AI systems through the India AI mission and others shows a willingness to build and also shows a willingness to know where accountability needs to be and how we need to think about privacy and safety as we build these systems. So there's definitely encouraging progress in India about, how do we manage risks, but also ensure that we reap the benefits. And I think a global stage such as the one in Paris is particularly encouraging because the dialogue starts not from, a blank slate, but from everyone's realities.
Oh, absolutely. And Nicholas Barr, before I thank the both of you, I want to understand from you your impressions of the West on one side, Europe and India at one level, and China on the other side. Where is the meeting point when it comes to the global framework, global governance framework?
Well, we are in a geopolitical moment that is really interesting because on one side you have the US, where the new administration is kind of protectionist, to say the least, and on the other side you have China, where we all know the regime and all the control that and censorship that is in place in this country. So so we are in the middle of in between those two big countries, and this geopolitical moment is interesting because we have lots of way. I mean, we can, the dialogue between Europe and India is probably more fruitful than it would be in another context. I mean, it's in this moment we've seen that with what Prime Minister said today.
Yes.
As I said in the beginning, there's a common dialogue, there's a common point of views that are obvious between the two, between Europe and India, and France in particular, and India, I would say.
Okay. For joining me here on this India Today special broadcast, Nicholas Mar and Vidushi Marda, many thanks for the conference. Now moves to India. India has offered to host it next time, and we will continue to track developments on this front very closely.